Good morning from Paris. Ni hao, hello, bonjour. I have been invited to share some thoughts with you on the topic of sharing transportation. We sometimes call it shared transport, vision and challenges. My objective this morning is to put these issues into a broader context. The broader context is sustainable transportation and sustainable cities and sustainable lives. And we really want to avoid one of the more dangerous, let's call it, practices that we can observe in transportation policy circles around the world, and that is that the fundamental issues often are simply not approached from the beginning to give a solid foundation for your project. And so we see people working on with a concept. We want to build a bicycle sharing project for our city. But the bicycle sharing project is part of a much more elaborate and much more demanding whole. And so as a first step, talking about shared transport today, I thought that I would try to give you some of this broader context, which I think is important. Now, I don't know if you've noticed it, but I'm not here in person. I'm here virtually through this little technology and this very simple video that we put together for you. The reason that I'm not with you is that since the late 1990s, I've organized my work and my travel around the concept of a carbon diet. This may sound a bit strange to you, but I figure that if I cannot function, if I cannot be an example for the people with whom I'm working and for the young people whom I teach, as far as being careful about my carbon footprint, then everything that I might have to say, as intelligent or stupid as it may be, doesn't quite have the same kind of meaning. So we have to be a bit careful, and the process that I developed all of those years ago was that when I come to some distant place from Paris, to get to you will take me 10 or 11 hours in the plane, and so for each hour I'm in the plane, I must work in terms of my area of specialty for one day. And there just simply wasn't enough time to get this organized this time around. Hopefully it will be the case in the future. So instead of getting on the plane, I come to you with a presentation that has three parts. The first is this video. The second part is a printed publication, which the organizers have been so kind as to translate into Chinese, and which you should have in front of you, which gives you more in-depth background on the matters in which I'm going to bring up in this short talk. And the third source that you might find useful is World Streets itself. World Streets is a collaborative, worldwide journal. We call it the Voice of Sustainable Transportation, which I created with a number of colleagues from cities and countries around the world some years ago. You can find it at www.worldstreets.org. And yes, we do a lot about shared transport. Articles have come in from many parts of the world, from many points of view, from many technologies. And you can see those if you go to the right of the main opening menu. You will see there's search by topics, and you search by topics, and one of those is sharing. And if you click that, you will find more than 100, I think mostly extremely interesting articles in background. So there will be more to my presentation. Hopefully you will take home more than these few words that I'm sharing with you this morning. Actually, although I've worked in the field of transportation for some 40 years now, that is not my basic background. My basic background is as a development economist, and more particularly in the field of sustainable development and social justice. And so everything that I do and everything that I try to understand this field in terms of sustainable transportation or unsustainable transportation is against this background, this broader background. I do have a goal, and that goal is the reason why I'm with you today, and that is that I believe that there is a terrific fit between the concept of shared transport and between both the dilemmas and the possibilities of transportation policy in Chinese cities. And China, of all the cities, of all the countries in the world, is the one country which I feel has the capability, has the flexibility to introduce an entire new approach to transportation policy and practice. And that is an approach which has a very strong vector in it of sharing. Now, when you get stuck in traffic trying to come to this meeting this morning, or if you find that the public transport service could be a little bit improved, you will be in a situation which is basically a worldwide dilemma. We have not done a very good job in making best use of our available resources in the transportation field. And so we have created unsustainable transportation, particularly in cities around the world. And this is most acute in cities that are growing quickly. Now, if that sounds like China to you, it is. There is an expression in American English which goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, this is a note of caution to ensure that before you go around fixing something, you understand the fundamentals of it. And I think we can say in China and in many other cities of the world that it is broke and that we do need to fix it. And that is, of course, one of the reasons why I and the other speakers here have come together with you in Changzhi. I'd like to put this briefly into worldwide context. And to do that, I will speak briefly about three numbers. The numbers are 7, 1, and 20. And I go into this in more detail in the paper, which you will find. But let me run quickly over them. The 7, that number 7, that's 7 billion people. 7 billion people on a planet that, when I was born, accommodated barely 2 billion. In other words, in a single lifetime, the number of people on this planet has multiplied by 3.5 times. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but the planet itself has not gotten any larger. This leads us to the second number, which the number is 1. And that is that this year, for the first time, not only were there 7 billion people on this planet for the first time, but also 1 billion motor vehicles on the planet for this time. Motor vehicles on the road, on the streets, parked, lost in many of their variations. And that's an awful lot of motor vehicles. And they are not being used as effectively as they should be. And who is responsible for that? Well, we are. You know, it is public policy that is going to decide, going to provide the framework for making use of this capability in a more effective manner. The third of the numbers that I wanted to address briefly is the number 20. That basically is 20%. The transportation sector accounts for basically 20% of all the natural and other resources that we use. It accounts for 20% of the pollution that we generate. It accounts for 20% of the energy that we consume. So the transportation sector is not a trivial consideration. From a worldwide perspective, in which we need to do better, the transportation sector is one of the most important in the world. And what's interesting about the transportation sector, and this may not immediately be apparent to many, is that it is the easiest sector that we can face and do something about. Many people will tell you that changing transportation habits and transportation arrangements is impossible. They're wrong. Not only is it possible, it's easy to do, but it does require that we have a level of understanding and a level of leadership and a capacity for communication that will allow us to change the underlying transportation arrangements. And that brings us to two vectors that I think are very important. The first has to do with technology. Archimedes, the Greek philosopher, mathematician, said something like 2.5 millennia ago that if you give me a lever that is long enough and a place to stand, I can move the planet. I can move the Earth. Well, technology has given us this lever that is long enough. And we are indeed moving the Earth, and not for the better. On the other hand, technology also is an enormous tool that we can put to work, and in a far more creative way. I got to thinking about this the other day. I was giving a master class for sustainable development and sustainable transportation in the city of Guadalajara in Mexico. And I had a group of 27 future leaders, young people working in government at the regional and city levels, and some advanced graduate students. And one of the things that we talked about was the iPad 2. The iPad 2 is so small. I mean, it's barely half a kilogram, and it is an interesting contrast with the world's best computer 60 years ago, which was a UNIVAC 1. The UNIVAC 1 cost at the time about $1.5 million and occupied an enormous space, something like 70 cubic meters. It consumed large amounts of electricity, and it did basically elementary arithmetic calculations. The iPad 2 not only has more than 1 million times the sheer calculating power per unit whatever within it, but it also addresses not just a well-defined mathematical problem like a regressions analysis or something of the sort, but it addresses the universe. It is. Someone said the other day, basing what they said on something that Steve Jobs had said back in the early 1980s, when he said, the computer is a bicycle of the mind. But the computer that was the example at the time, and in a small film which he made at the time, which you can also see on World Streets, by the way, the computer that he was talking about was an IBM PC. It didn't even have a hard disk. A very, very elementary piece of equipment. So the iPad is not the computer that is the bicycle of the mind. It's the iPad that is the bicycle of the mind. Now, we made some rough calculations, and it ended up that taking everything into consideration, the iPad looks something like outperforming the UNIVAC 1 by a factor of going on 1 trillion to 1. That number is certainly wrong. But let me just say to you that it is a very large number, and this is the kind of lever that Archimedes was talking about that will allow us to lift the world. So we have these technologies, and we have to put them to work in a more creative way. Okay, now basically, our city problem in a nutshell is simple when it comes to transportation. We have, on the one hand, too many vehicles on the road, and on the other hand, we have too poor mobility. All of those vehicles are not giving us the level of mobility that people need, ask for, and deserve. So we need to reduce the number of vehicles and increase the quantity of mobility. And among the ways of doing this, there are few that are better than shared transport. Shared transport allows us to put more people into each car than the 1.2 or 1.3 average, which is more or less worldwide, cars in traffic and going to work in the morning. and more goods into the trucks, vans, and buses. So our problem is, how do we move from the present very large and substantially underutilized fleet, bearing in mind that cars are parked about 95% of the time. So there's something that's terribly wrong with this. So we know that we need and deserve a better mobility, and the way that we're going to get to that is through sharing and through technology. And my fellow speakers will be talking a lot about sharing, and in my note to you, I identify 20 different kinds of shared transport options. That includes bicycle sharing and BRT, for example, which is essentially a form of road sharing, a new way of using the road. A bicycle, public bicycle, a new way of using a bicycle. And both of them against the context, the broader context of the city and the challenges of the city. But in addition to those, we identify 18 others. And of them, I will not go into them because that's what my colleagues are going to be doing here with you. But there is one that I would like to discuss briefly, comment on briefly, and that is the concept of car sharing that you're going to be hearing more from later today from two of our speakers. And I would just like to make the point that there is more to car sharing in the context of China than you may at first think. Car sharing is a serious ownership and use option for cars. It gives you a car when you need it. And if it is properly organized in an efficient manner, in a manner in which it is economic for you. And so if you can have a car whenever you need it, why would you spend 10 or 20% of your annual income on buying and maintaining a car when 95% of the time it's going to be parked? So car sharing has also, let me add, a very strong technological component. It is a technology which does not cost a huge amount of money and which is very flexible. And car sharing is a serious option for Chinese cities, towns, and even rural areas. Let me encourage you to think about it, not only in terms of the formulas which are used in New York, and Paris, and London, and other cities in the West, but look at it from an original point of view, from a Chinese point of view. Look at it from the beginning as if you were taking it in its simplest terms. How can we share cars among ourselves? Does it make any sense? How can we do it? Take a look at the Western models, but develop your own model. And I think you will find it a very important part of your transportation policy in the future. There are tremendous advantages to shared transport. There are two which above all distinguish it from traditional transportation policy and investments. First of all, these transportation arrangements can be brought online in a very short period of time, in a question of months or a few years at the most. And the second characteristic they have relative to traditional transportation investments is that they don't cost very much money. So if you have the possibility of investigating carefully transportation policy and practice options which can be brought online with a significant impact, that can be brought online quickly, and which can be brought online cheaply, I can think of no reason in the world why you shouldn't be looking at them carefully. China could become a leader in a very short period of time in this field. You have the capacity to take the problem apart, see it in original terms, and put it together in an original way, and to start to implement it in your cities. If you do this, China will be a shining example for a world much in need of shining examples. Thank you for your patience in listening with me. I hope you find some use in this, and I look forward to the discussions that will follow.